create and work with many thousands of files, and with each passing year, the number will grow. While some of them will have limited usage, many of your files will be reused and updated throughout your career. Consider your own resume. How many times has it been updated? Or maybe a particular unit assessment for one of the courses you teach. There's at least one for each course section you have taught, and even each particular file may have gone through several versions as you reused it for an alternative assessment or as a makeup. That's a lot of items that do the same thing. It would not be that hard to mix them up. It is very important, therefore, to have your files named and organized in such a manner that you don't have to waste time looking for what you need, or, worse, have to duplicate your efforts because you cannot find an item you already created. Some of you will even have files that span decades of use. Do you think you could remember the content and names of files you worked on even 10 years ago? Let's take a look at some of the content I had back from the 90s. Back then I taught high school math and science with the province's distance education system. I had some knowledge about organizing files, but I did not get everything right, as you will see. Here's a bird's eye look at the Google Drive where the files now reside. You will likely agree that the folders all make sense. If I asked you where the physics materials were found, you would have no difficulty knowing where to start. If we click to open the science folder, we will discover that yes, there they are. Clearly, the evaluation materials are done by school year, so you know where to go to find those. But it is not clear where anything else is stored. Things like worksheets or lab materials, for example. Where would you look? It's not clear at all that they are stored in the folder named Handbook. In retrospect, it's a poor choice of folder name. Now, let's look at the evaluation materials for one of the years. Within the years, the two different courses are separated, and it's easy to see which is which. Unfortunately, when you look at the contents of the folder, it's hard to tell what is what. It's not all bad. Look at the item with the red arrow, P3T1A.WPD. It's reasonable to say that this is a test or a quiz, given that the letter T is in the file name. And P3A1A, this item here with the green arrow, probably an assignment. After only a little thought, you will deduce correctly that the numbers refer to units. So, the file with the red arrow is most likely a test on the first part of Unit 1, and the one with the green arrow was probably the first assignment for Unit 1. But what material is covered in those units? After all, this was from the year 94-95, so in all likelihood, the course content has been significantly changed since then. So, even if you know what's currently in Units 1 and 2 of the course, it will probably be of no help here. Sadly, this file tells us nothing much unless we are able to recall what was in those units in those days. What's more, the files are not named consistently. Compare how Unit 2's first test is named differently from the second one. That only adds to the confusion. And this is not a terrible file system. You know what year each file is from, you can tell the tests from the assignments, and you can tell which unit and which course it relates to. The problem is that because of the lack of standardization, the order is haphazard, and you cannot really say for sure what material is in each. Wouldn't it be good if you could do that too? The good news is that you can, if you take the time to work out an organizational scheme and be consistent in how you apply it. Let's start with how files are named. It's best to use what many refer to as know-nothing naming. That is, to name your files in such a manner that someone else could read it and know what it contains. That said, you must balance the need to be precise and clear against the length of your file name. Nobody wants to read a file name that is a full sentence long. Worse, long names lead to long drive paths and to URLs that are very hard to get right. They also can make searching difficult. As a general rule, try to keep the file name to 30 characters or less. This is one case where a certain amount of jargon is acceptable. Let's say, in this case, you are looking at naming the files you use for mathematics. It is safe to assume that anyone else looking through the folder will be familiar with the mathematical content. There is no need, therefore, to completely spell out every mathematical term. You might, for example, represent the term division by the first three letters div. Likewise, the term operations can be shortened to ops, ops, and so on. Start your file name with whatever is most meaningful to you. This could be the subject, the type of file, or perhaps its intended usage. Go with what works best for you. While the creation date is part of the file's information and can be viewed with a property inspector within your file management application, it is often a good idea to include it in the file name to save that extra step. If you do this, use the standard format of a 2 or 4 digit year, followed by 2 digits for the month and 2 for the day. Do not include unnecessary words. Only go with terms that add understanding. This means, for example, that ands, ifs, and buts can be left out. Avoid the use of the words final or draft in the file names. Instead, include a 2-digit version number. Also, avoid the use of special characters such as commas, slashes, and semicolons, even spaces. These can make searching difficult and may not work with different operating systems when you move files around. Instead, delimit words using initial capitals. Consider this file. There are quite a few things wrong with it. At over 50 characters, this file is far too long. The words your and to need to be dropped. The spaces need to be removed. And the initial of each remaining word needs to be capitalized. The remaining words are all familiar to mathematics teachers, so they can be abbreviated. And we have no real idea of which version this file is. All those instances of the word final? Looks like it wasn't. Since the word appears 8 times, I think we can assume that this is in fact the 8th version. Finally, the date is not in standard format. Here is a better version of that file name. It is now less than 30 characters long and contains no unnecessary words or spaces. All the terms are abbreviated but are recognizable to mathematics teachers. The date is standard, and you can now see it is version 8. The leading number is something you may or may not choose to go with. At the time of writing, that lesson was Unit 3, Section 1 of the textbook. So that 01 at the start makes it easy to associate the file with the relevant section of the test. This is the one part of the file name that could prove difficult way down the road and would need to be updated when the text was changed. You may even consider omitting it entirely. In the previous instance, we did not show the file extension. The full name of the file that we were just working on was, in fact, this. The part after the period, docx, is called the file extension. In this case, the file came from a word processor, most likely Microsoft Word or perhaps Google Docs, and it can be opened with either. You do not have to choose because the operating system is configured to associate the file with an app on your computer. Most file extensions are 3 or 4 letters long. You are likely used to seeing .xlsx files for Microsoft Excel and .pptx files for PowerPoint, and you have certainly seen .pdf, which means the file is an Adobe Portable Document Format file. Doubtless, you have worked with .gif, .jpeg, and .png images, and probably .mp3 and .mpeg sound files. Some file extensions are much longer. The extension .notebook for Smart Notebook files, for example, is relatively long. Regardless of how long or how short or how familiar or not the file extension is, you should never change the extension unless you are absolutely sure what you are doing, as you may render the file unreadable. So far, this tutorial has focused on naming the files you create for your teaching. You should consider the same for work submitted by your students. Suppose that your student Ashley Drodge has completed their math assignment on that same material. It was handwritten, so they scanned it and are about to submit it to you. They might name the file as shown. From the file name, you can easily see who did the work, what it was about, and that it is the 4th assignment. The same applies to all files, even the ones not directly associated with your teaching or learning. For example, you should never call your own resume, resume. Think of who it might be sent to. They would appreciate being able to tell from the file name what it was, who sent it, and when it was created. In that case, a file name like this one probably work well for your student Ashley Drodge. You will also need a system of folders to keep all your files organized. Before we go too far, let's address what is likely the worst affront to organization, namely, a computer desktop cluttered with assorted files. Here it is. Do not put files on your desktop unless it's something brand new and you need time to adjust your current management system to adapt to it. If you find yourself using the desktop often, there is something fundamentally wrong with your current system. Think it through and adjust. The best principle is to use a system of nested folders, that is, folders within folders. Instead of putting all your math files, for example, in one large folder, start by creating separate folders for each course or grade level you teach, and put them in the Math folder. In this case, let's assume we teach grades 7, 8, and 9 Math, and so we've created a folder for each one of those. Next, inside each of these folders, we will create separate folders for each unit of study or each curriculum strand, whichever works better. In this instance, for grade 7 Math, separate folders have been created for each subsection of the associated textbook. The letter U is used to indicate that each folder denotes a unit of study. Now, let's take a closer look at one unit, Unit 3, which deals with fractions, decimals, and percents. Could you tell that from the folder name? You might choose to put all the files associated with that unit right in the folder. Here's what it might look like. There are 24 files in that folder. You can see most of them. It is important to balance the number of files against the number of folders. The more folders you have, the fewer files each will have. And this will make it easier to browse for the file you need, assuming your file structure makes sense. You will still have more clicking to do. In this instance, the number of files is on the borderline, and you might consider adding one more level to the folder structure. Suppose you decided that for each unit of study, you would have separate folders for worksheets, presentations, smart notebook files, and assessment instruments. That same unit would look something like this. Consider this file, which is a worksheet on the topic of relating decimals, fractions, and percents. When all of the files were in the same folder, it had a longer name. Notice that we changed the file name, removing the WKS part from it, since it was in a worksheets folder. That part was unnecessary. We made the drive path a little longer, but made the file name shorter. Alternatively, you might have one folder for each course topic within each unit. The unit in question would look more like this. Here we have a separate folder for each topic in the textbook. And notice that we shortened the file names. Look at this one. It's now shorter because the name of the topic was in the folder. And once again, we made the file path a little longer, but we shortened the file name by the same amount. There is no completely right or wrong way to go at this point. It's more of a personal preference. Just remember to balance the number of folders and files. When either gets large, you start to lose the benefit of the organization. For any given subject or theme, 4 or perhaps even 5 levels deep is probably a limit. Beyond that, things tend to get cumbersome. In the example above, we have 4: subject, grade level, unit of study, and then topic within the unit. For university students, a system like the one above will work well. Start with academic year, then subject, then course, then unit. If it's primary elementary, you may instead decide to set theme as your top level folder. Under that, you may then organize by subject and then by date or perhaps by file type. Keep your work and personal files separate. If you use a cloud service, such as Google Drive, you should have separate accounts for each. In this instance, you will notice that it is all work files. Of course, I also have separate accounts for personal use. If you do not use a cloud service such as Google Drive, Dropbox, or Microsoft OneDrive, you should store your files in a shared space maintained by IT support, unless you have a reliable and consistent backup provision. One more thing. Try to avoid having to float your folders by adding numbers to them on a temporary basis. Here, we have selected the folder called PL Stuff and are renaming it to 01 PL Stuff. Notice that when we added the 01 to the start of the folder, the system moved it to the top of the folder list, thus making it easy to find. Overall, though, this means that you will waste a lot of time doing this and then undoing it to whatever piece of work you happen to be working on at the time. At some point, you're going to make mistakes and things are going to get rather disorganized. If you find yourself floating folders often, it probably means your organization system still needs more work. Besides, as we will see, when it becomes a necessity to make certain folders easier to find on a temporary basis, there are better ways. If you use Google Drive as your primary file storage area, you may benefit from some of the extras. You can change the color of your folders. If you like the visual appeal, you might use this as a way to make things easier to see and easier to find. You might, for example, make the folder of whiteboard files one color and the one with worksheets a different one, and so on for the rest of your folders. As is always the case, the main thing is to be consistent with your use of color. If, for example, dark blue is used for your whiteboard files in one folder, then it should be used that way for all your folders. If there is a file or folder that you use often, you can create a shortcut. This is a better solution than floating folders. To create a shortcut, all you do is right-click the file or folder that you want to create the shortcut for. Notice that Add Shortcut to Drive is one of the options, so we choose it. Next, we select the location where we want to put the shortcut. In this case, we will simply put it at the top level of the folder structure, so we select My Drive. We finish the process by clicking Add Shortcut. And the shortcut is created. Here's what it looks like for the subfolder we have been examining. The link is right on the left pane, and you can get instant access to that subfolder without navigating through the folder structure. This might be helpful to put in place on a temporary basis while your students are working on that unit. When you move on to the next unit, you can remove the shortcut to keep your sidebar simple. Do this by right-clicking on the shortcut and then selecting Remove. This does not remove the folder, only the shortcut to it. Google Drive also lets you place files in several folders without making copies. This is particularly useful when a file matches the purpose of several folders. Perhaps you created video that is needed with a worksheet and a test. Suppose also that you have already decided to store all of your videos for any given course in a folder called Videos. It would be nice to also have the video in the folder with the worksheets and tests, but creating extra copies wastes space and makes it very hard to decide which one is the most current. If you are using Google Drive, you can place the file in several folders without making copies. To place a file in multiple folders, first select it by clicking on it. Next, press Shift-Z on your keyboard. A dialog will then open up, allowing you to select the other folder in which you would also like to see the file. You then navigate to the folder in which you would also like to see the file. Note that the system is not actually making a copy of the file. It's just using its own internal system to make it seem that way. Because of this, you won't have to go through the many issues associated with maintaining multiple copies of the same file. This can be done for as many folders as you wish. If there is a folder you use frequently, you might also want to add it to your list of starred folders. You might see this as an alternative to creating a shortcut. Let's do this to the folder we already used to demonstrate shortcuts. First, select the folder with a left click. Next, right-click on the folder in question and select Add to Starred. And here's what it looks like now that the folder is starred. We scroll down and find Starred on the sidebar. When we click it, we can see that two folders have been starred. The one we just added, as well as another from some previous time. Clicking either will take us directly to that folder. You can remove any item from the starred list in a similar way. Select the item from the list of starred folders and right-click on it. Then click Remove. And you can see that the folder is now gone from the list. Note once again that this does not remove the folder. It just takes it off the list of the ones that are starred. Regardless of whether you store your files locally on a managed file server or in the cloud, your file manager will allow you to view your files in different ways. On Google Drive, for example, the default is a list of files or folders shown at the center of the screen, like you see right here. By clicking at this icon here at the top right of the screen, you can switch to a list view. The same is true of other file managers. Generally, you will find it on the View menu. Regardless of which of these you use, you will likely find it useful to make good use of the folder list in the sidebar. It allows you to better see the structure you have created. This is particularly useful when retrieving a file you have not used in a while. The logical order of the structure will lead you directly to the file. In general, then, set a view of your drive that is comfortable for you and use that left sidebar. Over time, you may find that things have changed. This will, in turn, necessitate some changes to your structure. Perhaps a course, a unit, or even a lesson has been renamed. If that is the case, and you want to keep as much of your structure as possible, it might be sufficient to simply rename the folder. To do this, first select the folder. Right-click on the folder. Notice that Rename is one of the options. Now, you can rename the folder. Just be careful to maintain the existing conventions so that the new folder name makes sense in the context of what already exists. Make a habit of deleting files you no longer need. What's the point of keeping them? And when you do, be mindful that deleted files will remain in the trash, still occupying space until you empty the trash. So remember to do that from time to time as well. If you are using Google Drive, at the bottom of your sidebar there is an item called Storage. When you click it, the system will generate a list of files organized by size. If you find that your drive space is filling up, this is a great way to find the larger files. And so you can either delete them or move them to free up some extra space if you need to. One final item. No matter how organized you are, occasionally you will find yourself unable to find a file. Perhaps you forgot the name, or maybe you simply placed it in the wrong folder. When this happens, remember that all file systems are searchable. There will always be a search box. Google Drive is particularly powerful in this regard. If you click the drop-down, notice that you can search for different kinds of files. You can even do an advanced search for a file that is proving to be particularly hard to find. As you can see, there are quite a few options you can use to locate a file. So, moving forward, try and put the principles outlined here into effect. Use the know-nothing principle to name your files. That is, be brief yet descriptive. Devise a logical system of nested folders for storing them. Apply your storage, naming, and classification rules consistently. Finally, if not using the cloud, be careful to make frequent backups. You can apply the same principles to your bookmarks. Let's say you just found a good web-based tool such as Desmos, a general-purpose graphing calculator, and immediately knew you would use it on a regular basis for all your math teaching. Your first inclination might be to bookmark it as quickly as possible by clicking the little bookmark star at the right-hand end of the address bar and then clicking Done. And you can see the bookmark is now on the Bookmarks bar. Still, that's not the best idea, but let's leave it for now. We will fix it near the end of this tutorial. Just as you will work with thousands of files in your careers, so too with websites. If you are in the habit of bookmarking the ones you find useful, it won't take long before they become nothing more than a tangled mess. And as such, hardly more useful than conducting a web search to find the site each time you need it, assuming you even remember it exists. There are a lot of resources on the World Wide Web after all. You would be much better off if you applied the same principles we just learned about to your bookmarks. For now, let's assume we are using Google Chrome, although what you are about to see will work the same for all web browsers. We start by clicking the Chrome menu at the top right of our browser, then Bookmarks, and then finally clicking Bookmark Manager. This takes you to the Bookmarks Manager page. Notice that it contains a list of folders down the left side in a manner that is reminiscent of how Google Drive does it. You can see, for example, the contents of the Daily Use personal folder. It contains, among other things, a link to my newspaper e-edition. You can probably tell from some of the sites that I keenly follow the weather, and I seem to enjoy crosswords. Likewise, the Daily Use folder contains things I use on the job on a regular basis, including a link to my Mun webmail. The Math folder, as you expect, contains links to resources that are useful for teaching math. You may notice, for example, links to Khan Academy, as well as to the testing tools Quizlet and Kahoot. More importantly, though, notice that the Math folder also contains nested folders, one each for different grades. When we click on the Math 7 folder, we see that it contains items specific to that grade, including the Provincial Curriculum Guide, resources provided by the school district, as well as items for the same course from other places. The NLESD resources are at the bottom of the list. Fortunately, you can use drag and drop to change the order in which the bookmarks appear. This allows us to place the link, which will be used often, near the top. You visit a link by clicking on the bookmark. Here's what happens when we click on the one for Desmos, shown in the Bookmarks bar. It's also easy to create a well-formatted bookmark. Let's locate the Grade 8 Math Curriculum Guide and then create a bookmark for it. First, let's find the resource using a web search. Once we have it in the View pane, we start the process by clicking on the star at the right hand of the address bar. The initial name made no sense, so we type a more descriptive name. The system wants to put it in the Math 7 folder. That won't do, so we click to change the folder. We click the Math 8 folder, which is nested within the Math folder. Then we click Save. And now, about that Desmos link mentioned earlier. It's kind of out of place there up on the Bookmarks bar. We could delete it and add it again, but this time in the Math folder. But fortunately, we do not have to. We can edit the bookmark. We do this by selecting the bookmark, then right-clicking on it, and then selecting Edit. We get a screen similar to the one we just saw. Notice that, once again, we can change the name of the link, as well as the folder that we wish to store it on. This time, it's the Math folder, and we click Saved to finish. And that completes the material for this tutorial. As before, the principles are: use know-nothing naming, use nested folders, and be consistent.